what I've done throughout the last 2 semesters with Soccer. I think this is probably the second time or the second class that I use Soccer with. I'm teaching in the Department of Chemical Process Technology in the Institute of Technical Education in Singapore. So what we do is we train, we pretty much like what Weising does. We train students in STEM discipline. So on my side, I use it on this module that I teach, which is called pharmaceutical and biologics processes. So my students typically go through a lot of practical and theory lessons. So we have a 50-50% or maybe 60-40 split, which is more practical than theory lessons in school. So what happens here is I'm trying to see if I could piece together using the app, the theory component and the practical component that my student experience. So because in our practical classes, typically we do a lot of hands-on, and then we work on machines and things like that. And then in theory lessons, we try and cover the background concepts in a broader view of the topics that we are teaching. So because of the nature that we structure it, sometimes we find that students might find it a little bit difficult to piece the two together, because what we are doing sometimes is difficult to relate behind. So a large part of what I did is I try to get students to relate them together and maybe get them to relate what they learn in the theory classes, so what they have in real life, and maybe what they do in their practical classes. So yeah, this is just quickly a list of things that I attempted over the last I think a year. Yeah, so first in practical classes, I try to get students to do some demonstrations and video instructions of the work that they do. In theory teaching, I tend to use it a little bit more. I get students to post up things, or I post up certain things to elicit some comments from them. Hopefully, as a starter for every lesson, to get them to recollect what they did in their practical lessons, or what they did in the previous classes before we kickstart the next one. I tried a lot on getting the students to recontextualize what they learned previously as an after lesson assignment. So I also noticed that some of my students, they tend to like to engage after lesson hours. So for some reason, students being students during lesson not so interested but after lesson somehow they become a bit more interested. Well, thanks Weising. I think I have somebody that agree with me. So for me, I think it is a pretty useful as an after office hour kind of thing to get them to pull them back once in a while to tickle the brain a little bit after classes. So then of course through the app, we also try and as part of the holistic education system, we try to get students to showcase a little bit of talent if they have in trying to present some of the facts. In the school, because we are a science school, and yeah, a lot of things tend to be a little bit dry. We do have students that are very good in other aspects. So by using the app, we find that yeah, probably we can get them to showcase some of these things, and if we can discover them and probably develop that part of their talent. So I also tried to use it as a tool for revision. I post up questions, and then we get them to share pretty much like a nicer version of a discussion board. I think it's more modern. Students probably are more receptive, and I think the ability for the app to do instantaneous replies and things like that, I think helps a lot to keep the momentum of learning. So maybe just let me share a few screenshots that I did of the post. So yeah, so on the top left-hand corner and the tool on the top, this is my attempt to get the students to recontextualize. I was teaching a topic on filtration, so I was just trying to get them to see what they can find in real life on filtration and see if they can relate what was taught, the basic concepts of filtration and the daily life, what they can see. So so the very top one is interesting. From the app, actually, I found that, oh, okay, I have a student who is very much into 80s and 90s music culture. So, yeah, guys like me in the 80s and 90s will probably recognize that image. Freddie Mercury and things like that. So, interesting. Yeah, on the bottom left-hand corner, I get students to document some of the problems that they have, or some of the blunders that they did during practical lessons. So what happened was the lab was flooded because a student forgot to turn off a pump. So we end up flooded the lab, and then yeah, of course, I got some student to take to video it down. So as a reminder to make sure that other students see and then get themselves reminded that, okay, please, before you do certain things, you got to switch off certain things and take some precautions, if not, things may happen. And then on the bottom, in the center, this is my attempt to make revision questions a little bit more interesting. I made it into like a little poll so my students can key in their replies on the comments. So at the same time, other students can look at what their peers have replied and maybe draw some inspiration from there. A good opportunity for me to look at any misconceptions as well. Then on the right hand side, it's just a little post that I put up to remind them to remember to bring their calculator to the exam. Yeah. So okay, so basically for me, my feedback, I think soccer is a fresh way to engage with the learners. I think the existing systems are rather boring, are rather stale. I think everything's black, white, or gray, or maybe brown sometimes. So yeah, so probably it's a different way. It's fresher. It's something familiar to the students. So yeah, like I mentioned, opportunity for me to discover some talents that my students have out of office too. I do see some misconceptions from students quite easily. I think it's the nature of how the information or how the threads are organized. It's easy for me to stroll through. I think it's an interesting blend of instant messaging and discussion forum. I think we don't want too much of both. I think a lot of us communicate with our students with instant messaging like WhatsApp and things like that. So I think sometimes our messages tend to get flushed quite easily. They sometimes tend to miss things quite easily. And discussion forum, I think, is a little bit too boring. Some students want to go in and see, and yeah, you tend to have to write things nicely. So I think a lot of students don't like it. So I think this is an interesting blend in between. Yeah, and then of course it's rather easy for me to track student activity because I can filter them in the web version. I can filter student activities and things like that. So, and then yeah, some of the negative things, I wouldn't say negative, but some difficulties that I face. Apparently it's a little bit closer to TikTok, so I'm not familiar with TikTok, so it took a little bit of time to get used to it, and then a slight learning curve for some users that I find. So next, of course, I talked to some of the students. I think me and Daniel, and also I think Uma. I think some of us talked to some students to get some feedback on this. I think two interesting things emerged that is quite intriguing for me. I think peer-to-peer assessment is something that I realized. The students tend to learn from each other a little bit more. They in fact even try to access and see if the students got it right or wrong, and probably impacted them and led them to a route of trying to reflect on what they learned, which is probably ideal because in the meantime, while we're doing the base, although our theory is easy, but I think good in a way that it can probably trigger or facilitate a little bit of higher order thinking. And I think the next one that is surprising is competitiveness. I think by looking at their friends' posts, I think some of them tend to get a bit competitive and want to do a little bit better. I think that is a lot that is probably quite motivating in terms of their interest and their interest to learn from the topic. So yeah, in general, this is some of the feedbacks that I got. Yeah, students like to see their friends what they learn and things like that, especially when I have one class and then I split into two groups. So the first group will want to see the videos of the second group because they want to see what they learn in practical class. So sometimes the opposite happens. Then of course, the last minute revision, it's fast. When I post something, they get a notification. So I think it's fast, especially when I have last minute points that I want them to know before they go for exam. We can use that to push that information to them before they go, like a last minute thing. Yeah, it's rather easy to adapt. I think it's the interface is good. I think sometimes it's good to do fun videos as well. I think quite a good platform for it. Students become competitive, different understanding on topics after they see each other's posts. And then the last one, I think some students see it as a virtual note, like a virtual notepad that they let somebody have fill up for them. Right. So yeah, so this is what I have. Thank you very much.